Are you ready to unlock your full potential and maximize your productivity? Look no further than Productivity Smarts, the ultimate audio podcast hosted by renowned productivity expert Gerald J. Leonard. In every episode, Gerald shares captivating stories, invaluable tips, and cutting-edge strategies that will transform the way you approach productivity. Whether you're looking to reduce stress, overcome overwhelm, or simply get more done in less time, Productivity Smarts has got you covered. But that's not all. You'll also gain inspiration from real-life success stories of individuals who have achieved greatness through productivity. Plus, you'll learn the latest tools, techniques, and habits that will help you achieve a new level of happiness and fulfillment in your personal and professional life. So why wait? Join us every week as we delve into the exciting world of productivity and help you unleash your full potential. Get ready to take your productivity to the next level with Productivity Smarts. As a productivity expert and host of the Productivity Smarts podcast, Gerald J. Leonard has been a proud supporter of Kiva since 2011. Kiva is a non-profit organization that helps entrepreneurs in third world countries access the capital they need to start or grow their businesses. By making a small loan through Kiva, you can help these entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, support their families, and contribute to their local economies. And with a repayment rate of over 96%, your loan can be relent to another entrepreneur once it's repaid, creating a ripple effect of positive change. So if you're looking for a meaningful way to make a difference in the world, consider making a loan through Kiva. With loans as small as $25, anyone can be a microlender and help change lives. Visit kiva.org to learn more and start lending today.
Today, we're speaking with Dr. Delia Chiaramonte. She is the founder of the Integrative Palliative Institute and host of the Integrative Palliative Podcast. She provides education and coaching to clinicians and families who care for people who are aging or ill. Dr. Delia Chiaramonte is an integrative palliative medicine physician and joyful palliative care coach. Dr. Chiaramonte is an adjunct assistant professor at the University of Maryland, and she has published textbook chapters in the fields of integrative palliative medicine, and she has been voted a top doctor by her physician peers. She is the author of Coping Courageously, a heart-centered guide for navigating a loved one's illness without losing yourself. Doctor, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Excellent. I'm really excited to have you here. Could you define integrative palliative medicine for us?
Yes, I'm so glad that you asked that question. So integrative palliative medicine is a combination of two separate fields, integrative medicine and palliative medicine, and most people don't know what either of those things are. So I would love to tell you about that if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So palliative medicine is the care of families who are facing serious illness, focused on improving symptoms, improving well-being, reducing suffering. Right. So I'll give you an example. If you have cancer, maybe a stage 3 cancer, and you're hoping to be cured, your oncologist is all about the cancer, trying to fix the cancer. They may give you medicines that actually make you feel worse, right? They might give you chemotherapy, which makes you feel tired and nauseous, might give you radiation, because they're not trying to make you feel better today. They're trying to work on your cancer. But palliative care clinicians are all about you feeling better. So while your oncology doctor is trying to get rid of the cancer, the palliative medicine doctors and nurses, nurse practitioners, social workers, chaplains, we work as a team generally, are completely focused on reducing your suffering. So that's your physical suffering, your emotional suffering, and your spiritual suffering.
Okay.
And it is appropriate at diagnosis, which is so important to say because many people are mistaken. They think that palliative care and hospice are the same thing, but they're not. Hospice is a teeny tiny part of palliative care. Palliative care is huge. Hospice is the little tiny piece as someone gets closer to the end of their life.
Right.
Palliative care is appropriate anytime someone has a serious illness and they're feeling a physical symptom, an emotional symptom, or a spiritual symptom, or they have medical decisions to make.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And to be honest, I know when we first met and you shared about your book and this topic, and it's like, why this topic on a productivity podcast? And I believe it's really important because personally, in April, I lost my mom, and she had
Sorry.
Alzheimer's for 18 years, dementia. And in the last part of her life, she was in hospice, right? And obviously, having those kinds of cares and the palliative care to what extent she had it, which I wasn't aware of that word until I read your book or reviewed your book, was really important, knowing that she was okay and how important it is for as a family, because when you're going through something, it doesn't care if you are a dishwasher or a CEO,
Nope.
right? It doesn't care. And it's going to lay on you as a person and as a family the same amount of intensity and struggle, and to be productively smart. That's why I talk about all these different areas in life that are around that are important, because we still need to be productive, but we need to be productively intelligent and also real, because these are things that happen in real people's lives and that happen every day. And we can't always just put on the Superman cape. But if we have the knowledge and the tools, we may have to be able to take the cape off, but we can still be productive and strong and move things on. So I always ask my guests this question, and that is, what has made you so successful in your career up to this point? Because obviously you've accomplished quite a number of things and been voted top doctor by your peers, which is, very impressive to say the least, not just by an outside organization, but by people who work with you day to day. What's made you successful?
I think it's a combination of head and heart. So obviously, to be a good doctor, you have to learn a lot of things and continue to study and be curious and do well in school and all that. So there's that piece. But I don't think that differentiates me, because all doctors are like that.
Right.
But I think the other part is the heart part. And when I was in medical school, they actually told us, hide your own emotions, keep your emotions completely separate from the patient, as in you're over here and they're over there, and you don't let them touch you because otherwise you'll burn out. That's pretty much what I was told. Like, basically shut down your humanity and just write prescriptions.
Right.
And that never felt right to me, ever. And I started my medical career as a family doctor, and moved to palliative medicine because I really liked the depth and connection that comes with walking beside people when they're dealing with a really difficult thing, when they're facing their mortality or a serious illness. And I think it is bringing my humanity to the doctor-patient and doctor-family encounter that really is differentiating. And this is part of why I teach doctors and clinicians and also family members, because you have to find the balance of bringing your whole self without letting yourself get completely depleted and burnt out. So you have to learn how to give some of you, but also protect yourself and take care of your own well-being. And it's challenging to do both. It's nuanced, but it's really important.
Right. That brought up a question for me, is how do you protect yourself, or how do you, I guess that's the right word. How do you protect yourself from being so close to patients that are going through such difficult situations? And obviously in this particular field, you probably have lost some patients as well. How do you go about doing that as well?
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted, and I'd love to talk about a couple of those facets. I would say the first thing that strikes me is that many people said to me over the years, oh, palliative care must be so depressing. And for me, it's the opposite of depressing, because what I find is that family members and patients, when they are faced with the possibility of a mortality coming soon, when someone might die, they often, not always, but often change the way they're living. So they stop doing things that they don't want to do. They stop seeing people that they don't like. They focus on what really matters to them, their family, their God, if that's important to them, their garden, their dog, their hobbies, their art. And they fill their days with the things that really matter. And then it turns out that even if they have an advanced cancer, they're happier, actually. And when I first saw this, I was so struck. And I thought, gosh, how about I learn that before I get cancer? Can I live my life that way now? And it absolutely helped me be a more present and grateful and happy person,
Gotcha.
which is not to say like, oh, thank goodness that's not me, but more I saw the skills that they were using and I thought I should learn to practice them now.
Right.
So that's part of it. And then I think the second part is this idea of control what you can and let go of the rest.
Yes.
Which is also an important concept for family members who have someone who's ill in the family. You can control some things, right? You can get a good doctor. You can pick up the medicines from the pharmacy. You can bring them to chemotherapy or radiation. Control what you can, but then you have to let go, give up, let go of the rest, because we don't always know what's going to happen. We give 5 people the same medicine and 4 of them get better and 1 of them doesn't, right? And we can't control that. And so clinicians who feel a failure every time someone doesn't get better, they really burn out and it wounds them, their soul. So this idea of bring your best self, bring everything, but then I let go of the outcome. Some people get better and some people don't, and that's not in my hands. So I think learning that skill has helped me as a clinician, but also just as a human.
Yes, I was introduced to the concept earlier on and actually I really leveraged it. I have a middle brother that passed away in 2011, and he's like about 5 years older than I. And when I first heard about it, I remembered a skill, which was your circle of control and your circle of concern. And I literally I was away on a trip, and I literally had to take a sheet of paper out and draw 2 circles, a smaller circle of what do I have control over? And a circle of concern is what are the things outside of my control that I'm concerned about, but I really have no control over. The sad part was his death was a part of the concern, but what I had control over was how was I going to be? Yes. And what kind of person was I going to be for him? Because I did get to spend some time with him before he passed away and really have that conversation and really reconnect and talk about our childhood and so on. And so I hear you and I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, because I've actually had to use that myself, and I had just learned it just a little bit different terminology, but same concept. And it's really, really important to understand what you have control over, which is your thoughts, yourself, your mindset, your schedule, what you can control, and everything else you can try to influence, but you just have to let it go and trust.
And people cause a lot of suffering for themselves by trying to control the things they can't control.
Exactly. And that becomes very unproductive, right? Because we then try to take over things that we have no way of controlling, and we spend so much energy on things that we have no way of controlling or manifesting or dealing with. And we should be focusing our energy more on where can we make a difference. So that leads me to your book. I really enjoyed going through your book, and obviously you share some life experiences. I love the first chapter where you talk about, or sections where you talk about finding the flowers in the poop. and I was like, okay, so I started scanning and I was like, okay, now I see what she's talking about. And so let me ask you this. What are some common productivity pitfalls that caregivers encounter, and how can they mitigate them while still providing that effective care? And how has finding flowers in the poop, I know you told stories, but what are some of the stories that you told, and how does that influence that question as well?
Yeah. So I think just to speak to productivity for a second, this is such a human experience to have a loved one who is sick. It hits almost everybody.
Yes.
And when we are drowning in it, it is very hard to do the rest of life, right?
Yes.
To be productive at home, to be productive at work. Like the whole universe doesn't stop just because your mom has Alzheimer's disease for 18 years, right? You still have to make a career, and you have to clean your house and do your laundry and all that stuff. And so the way I see that it's really connected is when we swirl in it, when we're just flailing, trying to control things we can't control, and feeling agitated and angry, and, having conflict at home and crying, agonizing. That makes the whole experience of just getting through the day and living your life that you have to live harder.
Yes.
So the tools that help human beings cope with the difficult situation of a loved one who's sick, help their productivity everywhere, right? It helps their productivity as caregivers, but it also helps their productivity as spouses and parents and sisters and brothers and at work and as a team member, etc. So what I would say is that there are many, but one of the big mistakes that people make is this idea of toxic positivity.
Mm.
It is a very draining experience. And here's the concept of toxic positivity. The concept is it's all good, everything's fine, everything's great, when it's not, right? So here's how it often shows up. I have seen this, the story is in the book, but I've seen this experience a million times.
Right.
A person is in the hospital and I walk in, hi, I'm the palliative care doctor. How are you doing today? And in this particular story in the book, the person said, oh, well, oncology was here and they said that the medicine may not work. The other ones didn't work. They would try something, but it might not work. And the spouse and children who were in the room jumped on this poor man and said, don't say that, Dad. You can't say that. Don't you dare talk that way. It's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. You have to be positive. Everything's fine. And they did that from love, right? They weren't trying to be hurtful. They were trying to say, we can't handle this idea that you might die or that your cancer might progress. And so we just want to block that all out from this room. But what that does to the person themselves who brought up this thing is it gives them the message, you're not to talk about that stuff here.
Right.
It doesn't take it away from their mind. It just makes them be all alone with it.
Yeah.
But the other thing that does is now it's starting to fracture the family because that person who now is feeling these fears shuts down to the rest of the family.
Yeah.
And maybe the rest of the family's like, why are you being like that? Why aren't you talking? Like, why are you pulling away from us? And then everybody gets on each other and bickers. And all of a sudden, the experience of being together feels worse. People aren't sleeping. They're mad. They're, annoyed with each other. They're like, why don't you eat? If you don't eat, you're not going to get better. Leave me alone. That kind of thing.
Yes.
All of that is so depleting. And yet there's the rest of life that you have to go through.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And so if instead of that, you allow the person their feelings and say, well, tell me more about that. Tell me how you're feeling. Tell me what you're thinking. That opens space to look for those flowers in the poop. And the idea of flowers in the poop, of course, is that things can be really tough, really bad,
a
lot of poop,
Yep.
and yet there can be blessings, right? And one of the tricks that I give people, and I use myself all the time to practice this, is this sentence, which I encourage you all to practice. I don't like, or if you want to say I hate, I don't like blank, but at least blank. So I hate that I have cancer, but at least I have a wonderful family.
Right.
Or I really don't like that I have to go to chemotherapy, but at least the nurses are really nice.
Right.
Or they don't even have to be connected. I don't like that mom is losing her memory, but at least we got this adorable new dog. Right.
Exactly.
Right. And so that idea that I don't like blank, but at least blank, that basically practices the flowers in the poop. It makes space for the bad thing.
Yep.
I don't like blank. That's the bad thing. But at least, so kind of turns your head to the side looking for a flower. Even if the flower is, I got a good parking place today. I had a nice sandwich. I met that really nice lady. It doesn't have to be big, but it practices this idea that you can be in this space of things are hard and also here's a little blessing.
Yes. Now that reminds me, and I'll share this little story, is that when I got word that my mom was passing, I was on a flight up in Minneapolis coming back home. And I wasn't going to where she was living. I was going back to my home where I live. And it was probably about a 5:30 a.m. flight or a 6 o'clock flight. So I got a text message from family that, mom was gone. I had to fly from where I was to Chicago and then wait for a couple hours and then fly from there to home. And what I did with that, kind of that flowers in the poop concept, was I really believe in gratitude, right? Being grateful and being grateful as you're going through it. Because sometimes we wait to get through something difficult to be grateful. But I think it's more important to be, like you said, looking for those flowers while we're going through. And so I just took out a notepad or my digital iPad and wrote just a list of things that I was grateful for about my mom and the things that she taught me. and the things that I learned. And I did it because I wanted to be in a place where I'd faced the fact that this very difficult thing had happened, right? That I lost my mom, but that I wanted to position it where it was also, again, seeing it from, this is life. Everybody goes through this. Everyone's going to be, there's one of my coaches, Les Brown, says the only way we're going to get out of here is we all got to die to get out, right? That's the only way we leave this place. And so it's going to happen, but it's for the ones who are left behind, it's how we embrace it. But I think that's true for other things that are really difficult that we may be going through, or even if you're listening and you're going through right now, instead of trying to wish it to be over, focus on what you're grateful for while you're going through, and you'll get a new level of strength emotionally from just that focus of gratitude. Any thoughts?
Yes, I completely agree with you. And the only caveat I would give related to the toxic positivity component is also make space for the hard part. Allow yourself to feel this is hard.
Yes.
Right. So sometimes people mistakenly use gratitude. You were not doing that, but sometimes people mistakenly use gratitude to whitewash over something like everything's great. It's fine. God called her home. It's all good. You shouldn't be sad. No, you should be sad. It's sad. It's hard to lose your mom. It's sad. And also, here are all the things I'm grateful for about her. So making space for this is hard. I don't like this part. I'm struggling, but also here's the good part. That's the flowers.
Exactly. And the last part of that little story was the first flight. That's what I did. The second flight, I just cried my eyes out.
Perfect. You made space for both.
Because it was really hard, right? It was a really hard thing to embrace. So my next question for you, and this gets around the part of your book where you talk about create an imperfect plan. I'm interested to know your concept around that. But the question is, how can someone maintain a balance between caregiving responsibilities and their professional obligations without compromising productivity in either area?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the idea of an imperfect plan is how to figure out the practical stuff. Because if you're caring for a loved one, say a parent with dementia, for example, there are so many complexities and way more than people expect before they get there.
Yeah.
People have an idea often in their head that, well, I'm a CEO, I'm competent, and I'm just going to learn the things you have to do, and it's going to be great. It's going to be fine. It's going to work well. It never works well. It just doesn't work well. It's just hard. First of all, the medical system is imperfect. Dementia is a very tough thing, and people are very irregular in their behavior. Working with siblings is tough. They all have a different impression about what should be happening, and all of your childhood stuff you had all comes out bigger when you have to do something tough because they're all grieving, right? Anticipatory grieving at the same time. So no one's bringing their best self. So we generate more suffering for ourselves than we have to. And that's the idea around productivity. It's hard no matter what. But if we do it in a certain way, it can be that amount of hard. If we do it in a more flailing way, controlling way, it can be hard times 10, which makes it much harder to be productive at work and in the rest of your life. So the idea of the imperfect plan is really being rational and non-judgmental. So the idea is you make a list of all the things that have to happen. And this will be different depending on if your parent or your loved one is living at home or in a facility or, what the problem is. But say, someone has to check in once a day. Someone has to fill the med packets. Somebody has to take them to the doctor. Someone has to clean the house. Somebody has to go shopping, right? There's a list of things that have to be done. And then you gather your team, whoever that is. Sometimes it's the children of this person. You gather the team. And with no judgment, this is the hardest part, no judgment, everybody gets to say what they can contribute. Because there becomes a lot of chaos and anger between caregivers. Like, well, I'm doing this. Why can't you do more? You live across the country and then you come in here for 2 weeks and you think you know everything. I'm here every day. And it generates conflict between people just when it would be much more helpful if they could support each other. So the idea is you say like, okay, I can come on the weekend, but I can't change diapers. Like I just can't do personal care. I can't do that. Another person might say, I can't even come, but I could pay for a caregiver. Someone could say, I will talk to the doctors. Someone else could say, I will make all the meals. right? So everybody has a different thing that they feel like they can do without torturing themselves.
Right.
So no judgment. Write down all the things that everybody says they can do and then look for the gaps. And often there aren't that many gaps when you really let people say what they can do. But if you have gaps, that's where you ideally, if you can, you hire somebody or you get a teenager to, come and watch them or whatever. You look for ways that you can get other people. Maybe you look deeper in your community. Is there someone in a faith community or book club who could help? But that is the idea, because what happens otherwise is, well, why don't you help, sister? I'm here. I do X this many things and you only do this tiny amount of things. And then that person feels defensive. And then all of a sudden they're fighting. And that's the part that makes it harder to be productive at work and at home, because now your support system is not supporting you and you're fighting and you feel worse than you have to feel. So that's really the idea, which is if you learn the skills to deal with this hard situation well, which is why I wrote this book, then it is not harder than it has to be. It's not that it's easy, but it is much easier. And it allows you to live the rest of your life while you're taking care of your loved one who is ill.
Exactly. I mean, it makes me think like, this is a great advertisement for your book that hospitals or hospice organizations should hand this out.
That's what I think. I think every single family who goes to hospice should get a copy of the book. I agree.
These are things that you discover later on in life, or after the fact, or after the, all the things have gone down and words have been said and things have happened. And you're like, is there a better way to deal with life this way? And in many times it's not so much because of bad intent on a sibling's part. It's just a lack of knowledge or insight, or not even understanding, because at first when I was scanning your book and I saw that, in my mind, I looked at the I and the T and I saw an MP, and the first words came to my mind was, create an implementation plan. And I'm thinking, okay.
It is that.
And then I went back and I wrote down what you said. I was like, wait, she said what's an imperfect plan? That's not what my brain thought of.
But see, that I'm so glad you said that. That's a perfect example, because if you go in thinking I'm going to implement it and I have all these skills and I'm a talented person and it's going to work well, and then it's chaos, which it often is, then not only are you upset because, your loved one is struggling, but now also you feel like I failed. Why couldn't I make this work? What's wrong? Must be your fault. How come you didn't do your part? Then it would have worked. And the thing that really has struck me about this, you just mentioned it. Because societally we're afraid to talk about death and we're afraid to talk about illness, and we're like, la, 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 I don't want to talk about it. We don't gain any skills in this because we never talk about it. Right. And then most of us end up in this situation, and it is the first time we've really thought about it. Right. And so you're learning it right as you're in the thick of it. It's like learning how to drive for the first time while you're having a car accident. Like, it makes no sense, right? We learn it first so that when we get to a difficult situation, we already have some skill. Exactly. Here, you just get dropped into it and you're supposed to be good at it when you have never thought about it for the first 50 years of your life. And that's crazy. And
it creates so much chaos and things that happens within families. And so you're correct. So, I'm a big advocate now of create an imperfect plan.
Excellent.
Any plan at that point is better than nothing, no plan at all. So I'm going to move on to the next topic. This was great. You also talk about focus on the now. And the question I have there is, can you share any specific techniques from your book that help caregivers stay organized and manage their time effectively? And I like the concept of focus on now.
Mm-hmm. So I know this is audio, but I'm going to describe it. I have this right by my desk always. It's a piece of paper that says past with a dash, and then now with a dash, and then future. And I have shown this to almost every family that I have cared for, because it is a key way for managing a really overwhelming situation. Right. And the idea is you put this little graphic, past dash now dash future, on sticky notes and put them around your house. And here's why. Our mind can only be in one of those three places at any given moment. We can be thinking about the past, which is often ruminating about things that didn't go well. Oh, right. I should have gone to the doctor sooner. Why, when she coughed, why didn't we get her a chest x-ray? Right? Ruminating about the past. It's done. There's nothing you can do about it. So it literally helps zero, but it makes you feel worse, right? Increases your stress, makes it harder to deal with this tough time. The future, often in cases like this, we're worrying. Oh my gosh, what if the cancer comes back? What if the CT scan is bad? What if mom can't live alone anymore?
Right.
Worrying about the future. That has not happened yet, right? So that also increases our stress, but just worrying about it doesn't actually change anything, right? Like either the CT scan is going to be okay or not, whether or not I worry about it.
Right.
But if I worry about it for the next week before we go, I will have a terrible week. It'll be bad for me and everybody around me. And then the exact same outcome will happen. Whereas in the now, like literally now, like
Right.
you and me having this conversation, most of the time things are okay-ish. Most of the time, someone's not trying to kill us. We're not starving to death. We're not horrifically hot or cold, right? Like literally now, it's kind of okay.
Right.
Now, we can't live every minute of our life this way, but we can do a better job than we tend to. And so we can try, particularly if we're going, oh my gosh, what if this, what if this, what if this, what if this, which is not helpful,
Right.
making us feel worse, increasing our blood pressure, increasing our stress, making us cranky, making our relationships worse. We can notice that, oh, I'm in the future because maybe I just looked at my little piece of paper, my sticky note that I put up. I've been in the future. Let me bring myself back to the now. So we could do something physical, like we could rub our hands together like this. We could take a big breath. We could rub our thumb and finger together and focus on that feeling. We could say, okay, what do I see? What do I smell? What do I feel? We could say to ourselves, okay, I'm cooking dinner right now. I smell the garlic. I see the peppers. I feel the heaviness of the knife in my hand. And if our mind's like, yeah, but what about the CT scan? No, nope. Take a breath. I see the peppers. I hear the sizzling. I smell the garlic. I feel the knife. Bringing our attention to the moment right now just reduces the amount of time that we generate stress for no reason at all.
Right.
And so it's a skill. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. And it is a powerful skill for reducing anxiety. And part of what people say when they're like, oh my God, I'm so anxious, they just feel out of control. They don't know how to not be anxious because it's not like you can say, don't worry.
Right.
You know, I mean, your mom has Alzheimer's, like, yeah, it's hard. It's not that it's not hard. It's just that we don't have to think about all the hard right this minute, right now. And if there's a time when we have to plan for something, okay, if your now is that you're planning, then plan. But if your planning time is going to happen the day after tomorrow, don't spend the next 2 days worrying about what if the planning doesn't work. Right. Be in the now. If the planning is now, then that's your now, and that's okay. The more you practice this skill, the more your stress gets reduced. And the better you're able to make decisions in tough situations, the easier you are to get along with your other family members. It really helps reduce the overall distress in the family.
Right. And especially something I learned from one of my coaches that's totally aligned with this. His name is Dr. Paul Shealy, and he teaches something called joy spring and also dropping in. And when we drop in, the idea is to start taking deep breaths, but to focus on the air coming in and out of the nostrils, right? If you stop and just simply start taking a deep breath and focus on the air and feel the air coming in and out of your nostrils, you can't think about the past and you can't think about the present.
Exactly.
You are totally in the now. And that, especially if you just take a few minutes to meditate, and while you're meditating, you do that nose breathing and you focus on the air coming in and out of your nose, it keeps you in the present. And you're right, it lowers all of that cortisol and adrenaline, and you're no longer being chased by the bear in the woods or the saber-toothed tiger in the bush. You're actually sitting in your home or wherever you are, and you're present and you're okay. And many times we just have to learn how to do that and stay out of the past. Because again, many times the past is just something that's in our head that we're reliving over and over again, or the future is something that's in our head that we're planning for, and we have to plan for the future. But again, we may be planning for the future thinking we're being chased by a bear or that tiger or that difficult conversation, when we don't have to actually put ourselves there, because our bodies are going to respond as if those things are happening, which raises our cortisol and adrenaline as well.
Exactly. And the other thing it does from a physiologic perspective is it reduces the ability of our prefrontal cortex,
Yes.
the thinking part of our brain, to make good decisions.
Right.
Because when the amygdala, which is the fear-based part of the brain, gets agitated, the prefrontal or thinking
Shuts
part of the
down.
brain, it shuts down. And so if you have to figure out how to do a complicated thing, the more you're in your stress response and your amygdala is in charge going, we're going to die, we're going to die, we're going to die, it's terrible. Yeah. The less you're able to make good decisions. So when you calm yourself in just the way you talked about, with meditation, with breath, with sometimes people like physical anchors, all of those ways that you bring yourself into the moment, you turn down your stress response, your sympathetic nervous system, your frontal lobe thinking part of the brain comes back online. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, I know what we're going to do. We're going to hire help for mom. You're going to help us pay. We're going to call the doctor. And all of a sudden you can make a plan. Whereas before you were just like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? It's a mess.
Exactly. I called it the amygdala hijack.
Yep, exactly right.
So the next area you talk about, and I have 3 more areas I want to just talk about quickly here, and it's face the darkness. And the question I had around that was, what role does self-care play in maintaining productivity for caregivers? And how can one prioritize amidst the demands of caregiving? And what do you mean by face the darkness as well?
Yeah. So let's start with that one. I think facing the darkness is really important. And probably for most people, the darkness is fear. Yeah. Sometimes maybe it's guilt or regret, but often it's fear. And yeah, things are scary. And it's scary to imagine losing a loved one or someone getting sick or you yourself getting sick. Yeah. However, when we focus on the fear part, the rest of our life dims.
Yes.
And here's an image that is helpful for me. Let's imagine that fear is this monster outside your door, and he's banging on the door, banging on the door, banging on the door, and you're holding the door shut to try to keep him out. All you can think about is keep him out. We don't think about it. We won't talk about it. Fear. Oh my gosh, it's so awful. I can't do anything else but hold this door shut. But when you're doing that, you can't watch a movie with your loved one. You can't go for a walk. You can't cook a meal. You can't take a shower because you're up against the door holding that fear out. It is taking over your attention to keep the fear away.
Right.
Whereas if we face the darkness and we say, we open the door. I'm like, all right, come in. And he sits on the couch and he's kind of stinky and you don't like him. And it's kind of a drag that he's there, but he's there, but you're going to go make cookies with your grandchild. And you're going to go for lunch with your friends, right? And you're going to go watch a movie with your kids. And he's still there and it's a drag and you wish he weren't there, but you are living your life. And that is how I see facing the darkness. Yes, there are scary things. Yes, you wish it were different. We can't control that, like we talked about before. Let it in, acknowledge it. I'm scared of that. I don't like that. I wish that were not a thing. But I'm acknowledging that it's there. And now I'm going to turn my attention and do something that fills me up.
Right? Exactly. And one of the things I've learned is that when I acknowledge a real situation that could create fear, anxiety, whatever you want to call it, but when I face it and I acknowledge it and I say, you know what, that's just what it is. But I'm not going to allow that, whatever that is, to determine how I live my life.
Exactly.
Right. Then I'm not being false or I'm not faking it. I'm not being unauthentic. I'm actually being real to say,
exactly,
this is a very difficult situation we're in right now, but we're not going to live this way. We're going to focus on these things. We're going to live in the now. We're going to breathe. We're not going to allow our amygdala to run our lives. We're going to make conscious decisions. We're not going to be ignorant of the fact of these difficult situations,
right?
But we're going to move forward. And whether it's stumbling forward, falling forward, however, we're just going to keep going forward. We're going to march forward, whatever that case is, to kind of keep things going. But I think it is important, as you say in your book, to face the darkness, accept it for what it is, and then move on.
Right, because otherwise we spend so much emotional time trying to keep it away, trying to stuff it in the basement, that we don't have space for connection, for joy, for happiness, for trips we want to take, right? All of the good things that we want to make sure we spend our time doing. And particularly if time is short, you don't want to waste it on the yuck. You don't want to waste it on the poop, right? You want to acknowledge the poop and then move on to the flowers.
Exactly. Which leads me to the next topic, which is fill up your cup. I like that one. And so how do emotional challenges associated with loved ones' illness affect our work performance, and what practices can help maintain focus and efficiency at work? And I love the concept of that question wrapped around the idea of filling up your cup.
Yep, 100%. Because if your cup is empty, so if you're physically depleted, emotionally depleted, spiritually depleted, everything else is so much harder.
Yeah.
Work is so much harder. Being productive is so much harder. Leading a team is so much harder. Getting your laundry done is so much harder. So when we are depleted, regular hard things become impossibly hard.
Yes.
And so when you are depleted, you are not productive at work. You are not productive at home. You are not a productive team leader. So filling up our cup is, in my opinion, is a responsibility of everybody, because if you do, you're a better boss, you're a better colleague, you're a better team leader, you're a better spouse, you're a better parent, and you're a better caregiver. So if you're a caregiver and you let yourself get depleted, and this happens all the time because people feel like, I'm fine, I don't need anything, I just care about my loved one, that's all I'm going to focus on, don't worry about my well-being. But here's what happens. They get depleted, and you know what happens when we get depleted? We get cranky. And now all of a sudden, you're a cranky caregiver, and your loved one does not deserve a cranky caregiver. Yeah. They don't want you cranky. They want you filled up, right? They don't want you sleep deprived because you're kind of a jerk then. Exactly. They want you to bring this happy, joyful, full energy into the space with them so that they can take some of it and connect with you in that way. So the idea of filling up your cup is that our cup, our emotional cup, is either super full, mid full, or dry, depleted. And we can feel it when we're depleted, right? But it's a two-sided equation. So sometimes the problem is a lot of stuff draining out of the bottom of the cup. Like there's a hole in the cup and a lot is draining out.
Right.
Sometimes the problem is that you're not putting anything into the top. It's sort of evaporating, nothing's going in the top. And most of the time it's both. You're not putting enough in the top and some of it's leaking out the bottom. Yep. And the reason I really like this model, and I actually have people, and I do it myself, draw a cup, and on the top of the page, you write down the things that fill up your cup. And on the bottom of the page, you write down the things that empty it. Yes. Because it's different for different people. That's why it's not like, oh, everyone should do yoga. Some people hate yoga. Maybe yoga empties your cup. Don't do it then, because that empties your cup, right?
Exactly.
Maybe making art fills your cup, but another person, if they made art, they would be so nasty to themselves and say, oh, I'm so terrible. It would empty their cup. So it's not about the thing. It's about whether it fills or empties your cup.
Exactly.
So the exercise is you put as many things on the top that you can think of. You write them down that fill up your cup or could fill up your cup. Used to fill it up, or you can imagine it might. On the bottom, you put all the things that are emptying your cup, including worrying, fighting with my sister, not getting enough sleep, being controlling, whatever, eating junk food, not exercising, whatever the things are for you, working too much. And then circle 2 things on the top. So that's things that could fill up your cup, and 2 things on the bottom, things that are emptying your cup that you could work on over the next week or 2.
Right.
And that gives you a way to start, because you're not going to go from depleted to full in a minute. Right. But you got to start someplace. So what could you do a little less of that's emptying your cup? Like I could maybe fight a little less with my sister, and I could eat a little less junk food, and maybe on the top, like sleep, maybe that fills you up. I could go to bed on time, and I could take a walk 3 times a week, because walking helps fill up my cup, as an example.
That is a great example and a great tool and a great visual, right? Because again, like you said, what may fill up my cup is not going to fill up your cup or the other person's cup or somebody else's cup who's listening, but they may have their thing, right? That they love to do that. And what happens, what I notice is when things get stressful, the things that fill up our cup, we tend to stop doing them.
Correct. It is remarkable how much that happens. Yeah. And people will tell you, oh, well, I used to walk and go to bed on time and eat healthy and, go play tennis every week and hang out go play golf with my friends. And did you feel better then? Yeah, I did. Do you do any of those things now? No, none of them. Well,
and here's the reason they say, then they say, I'm not doing it because I'm so stressed out.
I'm so stressed out. I don't have time. Right.
It's like, okay, think about that. If you're so stressed out, start doing what de-stresses you and then minimize, put some barriers around or some guardrails around what is stressing you so that it's, again, I always think of the airlines when you're on a flight and there's an emergency, they say, you put the mask on yourself first.
Correct.
Right. You got to fill up your cup first, because if we have nothing inside, then we have nothing to give.
Exactly.
And the last thing, someone who's ill or going through some really difficult challenges need is a caregiver who is depleted. And
they don't want that.
And
right.
They're struggling themselves. So they get to the point where they really don't want you around, because it's like, you're not that helpful, or you're not that encouraging, right? And we want to be encouraging and helpful to our loved ones as they're going through things. But the only way we can do it is to use that example, which I think is a great example, to fill up our own cups. Again, this should be a book that is handed out by hospice and doctors when they know that there is a terminal illness or illness in someone's family that the family members need some guidance, because many times we're given, my prayers are with you and so on. And those things are great, but having some guidance,
some skills, right?
Some skills. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Having some guidance and some skills. And that's what you deliver in this book. So the last area I want to talk about is really two things together that I thought I can't leave either one of them off. And it was the idea of flirt with forgiveness and leave a legacy. Right? I like those two. And the question is, are there any particular habits or routines that you suggest caregivers adopt to sustain their productivity over the long term?
Yeah, that's a great question. The foundation, I think, is to keep their cup at least moderately full.
Yep.
That's the foundation to it.
Yep.
And then I think looking for places to make meaning, I think, is very important. And so I call it flirting with forgiveness, because sometimes we have a loved one who is sick and we had a difficult relationship with them, or maybe they were not so nice to us. And I think the whitewashing people sometimes do of, oh, you have to forgive them because they're dying, that can be hurtful sometimes to the person who was perhaps wounded in some way. And so we can play with forgiveness, and we can play with the meaning of it. We can try to forgive that person. If we can't forgive that person, we can forgive ourselves for how we feel about the situation, for if we've been unkind to ourselves, if we've been unkind to other people. So looking for kind of the depth and meaning in this tough experience, which again, you can't do that if you're totally depleted. So that's why you got to fill up your cup first. Right. But then the kind of next level is this looking for depth and meaning, and then leaving a legacy. It's such a powerful tool to use with your loved one. And this is why it's so important that we talk about these things early. If we pretend that someone is not sick until they have 5 breaths left, we can't do any of this. We can't talk about forgiveness. We can't say the things we wanted to say. We can't do a big legacy project with them. But if we're willing to be brave and talk about these things early, oh my gosh, there are so many amazing legacy projects that you can help someone do. For example, maybe they want to tell their stories. Maybe they speak them to you and you record them and then you write them down. Maybe they want to make a family quilt with you. I have a patient who painted rocks, and she sold the rocks to make money for ovarian cancer, because that was the disease that she had. And I have some on my desk right here. So that became extremely meaningful to her, that she was raising money to help other women, even though she herself was not going to be cured. Right. And so families together can take a special trip. One person made boxes for all of her grandchildren, and she decorated these special boxes and put special things inside them so that each grandchild would have this precious personalized thing from their grandmother to remember her by. Right. So if we're brave and willing to face the darkness, right? To get in there and say, well, it looks like this illness is progressing. So what do we want to do here? What do we need to say to each other? How do we want to connect? Is there a thing we want to make? Is there a thing you'd like to leave? How can we really use this time as opposed to pretending it's not happening? Right. It can create such depth and connection and meaning. And it can be a really powerful and even positive experience, even though, of course, there's sadness involved as well.
Correct. I think this is an amazing concept, like the leave a legacy component, that really hit me just on an emotional level, from the standpoint of that, to me, is like the essence of the title of the book, Coping Courageously, because that takes courage, because that takes saying, I know this person is in their twilight, right? They're in their last days of their life, but we're going to do something together to where we're leaving a legacy in their name, and that they're on their way out knowing that they're making a mark in life, or they're doing something that's going to make a difference, which does take courage, because many people, they want to shy away from that. They don't want to face those emotions. But by standing up, facing the darkness, embracing all the things that we're just talking about, you're able to have so much more of a meaningful expression and transition as the person transitions, and as you, as a person who will no longer have that person in your life, you are also going through a transition, because you're experiencing that. And so it really touched me emotionally as well. So Dr. Chiaramonte, if people want to get to know you and learn more about you or find your book, where should they go?
They can go to copingcourageously.com, or caregivingishard.com will get them to the same place. And I would love to have people reach out. You can reach out to me directly through the website. I answer all emails. And I think it's important that as a society, we talk about it. We courageously talk about this stuff.
Right.
And, sometimes, as you said, people are afraid to think about legacy because, I don't want to admit that maybe this person is dying. And what if God decides to save them? And I always say you can hold space for both places, both things at the same time. If you make boxes and then God saves them, okay, you got boxes, give them to him for their 18th birthday.
You got a business.
Whatever, who cares? You made a quilt, great. You wrote a book, great. Like, there's no downside, really.
Exactly. You got a business, you're launching a new career, you got a speaking gig. I mean, you got so much going on, but if not, you've left something that people that love you can remember you by.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining Productivity Smarts podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
If you're enjoying the content and finding it valuable, we would appreciate it if you could take a moment and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and helps us reach a wider audience. If you leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. Not only does it help us improve the podcast, but it also helps us attract more sponsors and grow our community. Thank you again for your support and for listening to the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to Productivity Smarts, where we help you achieve your goals and live your best life. We hope you've gained valuable insights and actionable strategies to boost your productivity and increase your happiness and fulfillment. Remember to apply what you've learned and keep striving towards your goals. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring episodes and expert advice from our host, Gerald J. Leonard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and unleashing your productivity smarts.